So a bit of an introduction first of all, and I'll get straight into my session. So a little bit about me. That's me there, as you saw in the intro as well. My name is Shabaz Darr. I'm based in the north of the UK. You might have heard of Leeds, that sort of area. I'm an infrastructure master at a company called Netcompany. They're a Danish company, but they have a foothold in the UK as well. My main areas of focus are Azure, infrastructure as a service, Azure Virtual Desktop, which is what the topic is today, and MEM as well, so Endpoint Manager, Intune, and all that good stuff. I've been working in IT for the last 15 or so years, probably just over 15 years, and 8 of those have been within cloud. I started off with sort of Microsoft 365 migrations and worked my way into Azure. I was last year awarded as a Microsoft MVP in the Endpoint Mobility category, to make sure I remember. So not even a year. So as someone said earlier, the new kid on the block, maybe. I'm a 2-time published author, so I've authored 2 books this year, one being on both certification study guides, one on the SC400 exam on the information protection, and another book on the AZ140, so the Azure Virtual Desktop Specialist book. So they can both be found on Amazon. I also co-manage 2 user groups as well. So the first one is called the Bradford Cloud User Group. Bradford is a little city next to Leeds in the north of the UK. And also, you might know me from the UK AVD user group, which I manage with Neil McLaughlin. Got my own YouTube channel, which is I Am IT Geek, and my own blog site as well, which is also I Am IT Geek. So a little intro and agenda into what I'll be talking about today. So I will be going through my own sort of 10 Azure Virtual Desktop best practices. Couple of caveats. This is it's not an official list. This is based on all my own experiences. So I was lucky enough to start working with Azure Virtual Desktop when it was Windows Virtual Desktop, and it was only a few months in. I believe I did the third UK-wide deployment when COVID first hit for the NHS. So very early doors when it was all PowerShell, and this list will probably change by next week because there's so many updates every month, and this is just up until now what I feel are good best practices when you're implementing AVD. But with all the great stuff that comes out with it, that could change, all the time. So my first best practice I thought I'd mention, and you'd think this is a no-brainer really, but you'd be shocked at the amount of clients that I speak to that still don't use it, is implement multi-batch authentication. So one of the beauties about AVD is it's secure. It's secure by design, from the fact that it's very much based on traditional RDS for those who don't know much about it. But the sort of services that normally like the gateway service, the broker service, and stuff like that, they're all hidden away, and Microsoft manage those. So because you don't have that headache, you still need to have an element of protection though, and protecting your identity in cloud is obviously quite essential. And something like having an Azure AD P1 license at a minimum, and implementing MFA with conditional access, for me is something that should be part of your, if you're doing AVD, should be part of your sort of standard design. But especially during COVID, when so many people were just running to the cloud and wanted to get all their infrastructure in there, this was something people did overlook, especially, unfortunately, especially clients in the smaller clients, medium clients in the UK. But it's something that I always recommend when designing or speaking to clients when it comes to Azure Virtual Desktop. So something more recent, obviously, what used to be known as Azure Security Center, but is now called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Again, I've more recently started recommending this to clients as well. The beauty about AVD is because it's Azure native, you can integrate it with all those great Azure tools, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud, in my opinion, is one of those. So I always recommend that because you've got that protection, that sort of protective monitoring as well. It's not just about monitoring the sort of endpoint, which is the Windows 10 VMs. It's also about getting that analytics and that sort of overview of what threats are trying to get into your system. And I think the Microsoft Defender for Cloud, there's different iterations of it as well. You've got the server, you've got the app Defender, you've got the endpoint Defender. So it's got a wide variety of services within the suite that you can utilize. So I've more, probably in the last 6 months or so, started recommending more Microsoft Defender for Cloud, as to integrate that with Azure Virtual Desktop, because it has a lot of benefits. Again, just adds that another layer of protection. So something that is quite often overlooked is optimizing your sort of environment, and there's a couple of points that I've got around optimization. So the first thing is optimizing your session host, and you might wonder, what does that mean? What do we optimize? And it's about optimizing the performance, really. And the best way you can optimize the performance is by sizing correctly. And again, that's done, I suppose, before you implement anything, by doing like proof of concepts. I always try and recommend, we run a proof of concept, because when you are looking at, you're doing your sort of, in my opinion and in my experience, when you're doing that discovery work, people and clients have a vast majority in different applications. No clients have the same applications. Yes, they use Office and stuff like that, but you could have like an architect's practice that are using AutoCAD and very CPU and memory intensive applications, and you don't know how they're going to behave in a cloud virtual environment. So I always recommend trying to make sure we optimize our session hosts, make sure we size them correctly. And that's always one recommendation that I try to give to clients, that we set some time aside in that project to do full-on discovery and implement that in a POC. So that's always one recommendation I would definitely make, and I always try to make when designing and implementing AVD. These are in no particular order as well, by the way. These are just 10 that I kind of like to talk about. Integration with Endpoint Manager. This is something that's probably, I'd say, a bit more of a newer feature, really, especially since the Azure AD join became GA. Again, I'm sure most of you know about Endpoint Manager. It's a great sort of suite of different services, including Intune, Autopilot, Windows Update for Business, and all these things have really good integration with Windows 10. And AVD is obviously based on Windows 10. Yes, it supports Windows 7 and Server OS as well, but the main benefits around AVD are using that multi-session on Windows 10. So you think that a lot of clients might manage their laptops and their sort of on-premises sort of physical devices with Intune, then they've got a great reason to use that for AVD as well. And it not only does it allow you to manage your AVD environment much easier under one pane of glass, making sure you can deploy all the apps and all stuff like that, but also with things like Endpoint Analytics, which is again part of the sort of Endpoint Manager features. Lets you analyze your user experience, including looking at if you reboot a session host, how long is it taking to boot up, what services are taking time, how long is the logon process, all these really really granular information, which again will help you improve that user experience. So definitely a recommendation of mine is integrating with Endpoint Manager. Integrate your AVD session host and your environment with Endpoint Manager, because it has a whole host of massive benefits that will help you improve that user experience and help your admins manage the infrastructure as well. Automation, using automation where we can as well. I mean, there's going to be a great talk on Bicep after this one, so I'm sure we've seen some really cool stuff around automation in that. But once you've kind of sort of provisioned your environment, actually provision it using automations. Provision using things like Terraform and those scripts. So when it does come to you need to increase the amount of VMs, or you can do it very quickly. You don't have to do those manual sort of tasks. If you are able to automate where possible, it just lowers your administrator overhead. It means you're managing managing less and maybe improving more. Looking at how you can optimize more rather than managing and adding and removing services. So I definitely always recommend automating, and not just when you're implementing it either. If we look at again, I touch on cost optimization a bit. Oh, sorry. I'll be speaking about cost optimization soon, but using automation to scale in and scale out as well. So you're not just doing it as and when it's needed. If you hit certain thresholds within your environment, the CPU or the user count is getting to a certain level, you can just automatically increase the number of VMs and your number of session hosts. So again, using automation where you can and where possible will allow you to decrease your management overhead and allow your admin team to actually focus on improving your services rather than just doing manual tasks. So this is minimizing golden image. I'm personally not a fan of golden images, if I'm honest with you. I know it's quite heavily used by clients within Azure Virtual Desktop, but when you've got things like Endpoint Manager, Intune, Autopilot, you can deploy apps to your session host through Intune. That, in my opinion, there's less need for a golden image. So I won't say to clients that you don't need a golden image, because again, when people have different applications, they have different requirements. But I try to help clients minimize the size of their golden image. I'm sure we've all, before sort of AVD and that sort of thing, where clients, I've worked with clients where they had like 20 gig images. They were deploying it through SCCM or something like that, or on premises, and that's a huge image size. So I try and help customers, and I always recommend trying to minimize it. If there are applications we can deploy through Intune, or we can use something like MSIX app attach rather than adding it to the image, I always try and recommend that, because again, it's gonna decrease the amount of administrative overhead you need to do when it comes to updating. Rather than updating a 20 gig image, you can just update a smaller image, and you've got less apps to update and so forth. So I always try and recommend, and I think it's I try and recommend a best practice of minimizing the size of your golden image if you are using an image. I'm not going to quite recommend a best practice of not using an image, because that's a lot of clients I've worked with need it for certain applications, but definitely minimize the size of it if you can, as and where you can. So I mentioned it earlier about optimizing and automating where you can, but also work on optimizing your cost. And one of the things about cloud is it can be expensive if it's not managed correctly. When I first started working with cloud and I had my own tenant, the amount of times I'd forgotten to shut things off and I'd end up getting a £300 bill at the end of the month. It happens, and clients are the same. They sometimes, especially when they don't understand what they're provisioning, they can sometimes provision and a lot of infrastructure, and they might provision when they only need like 2 active at any one time, but they might just provision 5 session hosts in a host pool, just because or just in case they have a lot of high usage. But you can use the automation stuff that we're talking about before to optimize your cost as well. If say that your off-peak times, you don't need 5 session hosts, then put an automation script in on a workbook to shut those down. Shut 3 of those down if you only need 2, and then when your on-peak times come, when your peak times come, you can boot them back up again. There's auto shutdown features that'll help you stop your virtual machines and lower that cost. Again, same with storage, making sure you're sizing your storage correctly. Especially when you're using FSX logics and your Azure file shares, or NetApp file shares you might be using. Don't create a terabyte just for the sake of it in case one day you need it. Size correctly. But I think the key here is using that sort of automation tools, Azure Automate and your scale sets and things like that, to power services off when you're not using them. That'll allow you to optimize your cost, and essentially, you won't be paying those huge amounts for sometimes you can get with cloud infrastructure. So yeah, definitely recommend working on optimizing your cost. So again, you might think, well, this is a bit of a no-brainer, but the amount of clients I work with that just don't think about backups, especially when they're migrating to the cloud, is absurd. But I'd recommend, another recommendation is back up your AVD resources, back up your file shares. I've been speaking to a lot of clients recently about backup and BCP, and even though they're not in Azure Virtual Desktop, they want to use Azure Virtual Desktop as like their secondary site for their BCP plan. So I'm doing a lot around this at the moment, and backing up your VMs to a different region. If you think about it, 2 years ago, who thought something like COVID could ever happen? This is a prime example. We had clients and businesses that overnight had to send their staff home, and a lot of them weren't prepared for it. Like I must have done 6, 7, 8 Azure Virtual Desktop migrations in that first 6 months. It was just back to back. So many clients just weren't prepared for this. Weren't prepared for that COVID. So a lot of my customers are now saying, what if we have another sort of pandemic, or what if we have another incident where it means that we have to send our users home? And what if we lose our primary site? We want to be prepared now. Customers that I'm speaking to want to be more prepared for the next big thing that happens. So again, by backing up your resources, your session hosts, they're just virtual machines at the end of the day. Using things like Azure Backup. There's also third-party tools that you can do. You can use Veeam and things like that. But I always try and plan in my designs and in my sort of pricing, backing up and backing up the resources that need it really. So this is one where I suppose this is really linked. So continuously improve. So what I mean by that is, once you've done that AVD deployment, you've done that cost optimization, you've used, you're secure, you're using MFA, all those other things that I've mentioned. That's not the end. You don't just want to sit on your laurels. You want to, I always try and recommend that once we're in there, okay, in 6 months' time, let's have a look at how efficient you are. Let's use things like Cloud Defender, use that score, the security score, and let's have a look at, are you guys secure? How secure are you compared to other businesses at your size? I mentioned Endpoint Analytics. Let's use Endpoint Analytics to see how your user experience is. Is there anything we can improve on now that we're in, now that you've got Azure Virtual Desktop? And again, it just allows I feel like it allows clients to just stay ahead of the game. If you're continuously analyzing how you're running your infrastructure, how you're running the Azure Virtual Desktop environment, you're more prepared for a new security risk that might come out, or you're more prepared for, it might be a Windows update that got pushed out that's had a negative effect on your AVD environment, stuff like that. I mean, you can improve the experience of your users and your business as well. So I always try and recommend continuously improve. Let's not just, we've done it, let's just not just leave now. 6 months time, let's have another chat. Let's see where you're at. So this last one, obviously, it's a bit of a short presentation. I was hoping it'd be a bit longer. I do apologize, but this last one is, so I've got no affiliation with this company. I don't work for them. I'm a big fan of them though. So all the other 9 things that I've mentioned, this makes possible. This tool makes possible. And again, when I'm speaking to customers, I'm always recommending this. Nerdio. For those that don't know, Nerdio is essentially a tool to manage your Azure Virtual Desktop environments. It's not owned by Microsoft. Nerdio are a company of their own, but even Microsoft are pushing Nerdio. Microsoft are saying you use Nerdio, because Nerdio helps you not just manage. So a lot of the services I've been talking about, not a lot of them have been Azure Virtual Desktop. There've been services in in Azure that can integrate with AVD. So I spoke about automation, I spoke about cost optimization, MFA, all these things. These are all services outside of AVD but integrate with AVD. Great. As administrators, we need to have knowledge and skill of all those services to be able to integrate with AVD. Okay, and if we're doing that, we need to have, so you need to have that administrator level understanding. With Nerdio, what that allows us to do is, we just need to know Nerdio, because it does all the scripting in the back end. So it's really, really good to help you do all those management services within one platform. It helps you cost optimize. It helps you do all the automation that we've been talking about. and it's just very much suited to optimizing your costs and your environment. Very easy to use. I've got some videos on my YouTube channel around it if anybody wants to see it. But if you are thinking about doing AVD or implementing AVD, I would definitely recommend. I always recommend to my clients to use Nerdio. It's a very good tool, and it's helps out customers a lot. Are there any questions? I do apologize, it is a bit of a short presentation.
I'm just checking in the chat. There are no questions there at this point, I think. No.
I didn't see any.
Maybe a question from me. It happens I'm working on an AVD project at the moment. And when you talked about, let's say lean or a fat golden image or master image, when you previously, just before that, you mentioned automation. And if you're using automation, what will be against a fat image? Because automation can easily create that new image again for you, even if you have to make an application change or add a new application. If you have everything automated, it's just a few clicks and your new golden image is baked in a matter of minutes. Is there another disadvantage that I'm missing, or?
No, you're right. If you're using automation correctly, yeah, definitely it helps with your golden image. It's more that, again, my experience with it, people who do, or clients that have bigger images, it's normally because they have a lot of applications installed on there. And it's more that if you don't, like you said, you use automation. Yes, use automation to even if you do have a big image, to lower it. I just don't think there's that need to have the bigger image. Yeah, you can like you said, you can use automation to mitigate having a big image if you do have a big image, or I like to use the other tools like the app deployment and with Endpoint Manager and stuff like that to kind of decrease the image. To be fair, I prefer not having an image at all, but yeah, you're right, 100%. Automation can mitigate the needing to do that 100%.
Overhead, yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you.